Okay, so we should be live now, and we'll wait to give people a chance to join us before we get into the heart of it.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. So let me move to where I can see. And what we'll do is let people know what they're into. And so for those that can't join us live, we'll send out links for the replay, and I'll just say, hello, I'm Kimberly Hunt with Revision Division, and we'll get started in a minute. You're in for a treat here today. And is it okay that I reveal your full name?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we are here with author Elizabeth Anderson, and she is going to talk to us about all things characters, arcs, development, characterization, whatever questions you have. Oh, we've got some great people joining. We have Abby saying hello. We have Marvella saying Ravenlord here. Interesting. We've got a mage here.
I recognize these people. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Probably not that long, but just as a recap, for people as they join, I'm Kimberly Hunt. I'm an editor with Revision Division, and we've got a great treat here tonight with Elizabeth Anderson to talk about the remarkable retirement of Edna Fisher, and AKA the Chosen Grandma. So I have a lot of great questions to ask you about that, and we'll talk about how you developed your characters and take questions from people joining. So we have Liv, Icy here. Lots of great support. Thank you all for coming. All right, so on the blog, which is, I think, may have been, I'm not sure if we found each other on Twitter or if it was soon thereafter, Elizabeth, you did a guest post for the Revision Division blog where people can find tips and author interviews like this one and book reviews. So if you have ideas, send those. We'd love to read some books and review them, and a lot of writing and editing tips. And I think that's one of the things that we're here for tonight, is to talk about all the tips that we can share about characters. I'm sorry if you hear a little feedback. It might only be on my end. Maybe we'll try to make adjustments as we go. All right, so what we'll do is we'll start with a few questions that I have, and give you guys a chance to post your questions, and we'll get into the heart of it. But Elizabeth, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited, especially now that we're live and people are showing up.
Yes, isn't it a relief when you're like, oh, people are coming?
Right, especially after like spamming Twitter saying, please someone show up to this. So I mean, not that I wouldn't be delighted to just talk to you, but it's nice to have an audience for this.
Yeah. Actually, as a side note, in case any children come barging in, they were not supposed to be here tonight. And my husband's like, oh, well, change of plans. And I'm like, well, do I have to cancel? Because this isn't going to work. I'm like, I've been talking about it all week. I'm not canceling. But so I would love, what I've been looking forward to, why I didn't want to cancel, besides the fact that I've been hyping it up, you've been sharing with your fans too. I love your story of your journey, of how you were inspired, how Edna first came to you. And so I'd love to start there with just how your journey as a writer started, if you could share with our fans and followers.
Yeah, so I always have a slight problem with that question, only because I think a lot of writers have kind of this moment or this thing or this person who really made them go, wow, I want to do that. I want to be a writer, or like one single book or something like that. Mm. And well, as we were talking about before this chat, I have a very bad memory. So I think that's part of the reason I have trouble pinpointing like a single thing. Right. So I don't know, I come from a family of readers. My parents both read a lot, and they read aloud to us a lot. My sisters read. My grandpa had just tons of books on different subjects, and also he was a writer. He spent almost 30 years working on like a story based on his experiences in the Korean War. So there was just like a lot, like I was just inundated with influences when I was younger, I think. But probably the turning point for me, shout out to Young Writers Society and everyone from there watching right now, which by the sound of it is a lot of people, It's a website for young writers, ages 13 to 18. I'm just still there because I never left, and there are a lot of people who are in our 20s now who just never left. But it's a site for young writers. It's a really good community, and there's a really robust reviewing system, so everyone gets some feedback, and there are a lot of different fun things to do, and you can explore all these different styles of writings. And so I really feel like that's really where it took off. I think it was finding a community for me that was really robust and where I could meet a lot of other writers. I think that's really when it took off for me.
That's awesome. So you've got a lot of people excited here. I'm going to show some of the comments as you talk through that. And it sounds to me like, as someone who looks for the chance to give back, it sounds like you're able then, because you've stayed with the young writers, to kind of mentor and give back and give feedback. Is that how it works? Like, you're able to also...
Yeah, so the reviewing system essentially, like, you pay in points to post your work, and then you earn points by reviewing things. So right from the get-go, you're really motivated to do some reviewing so that you can post your own stuff for feedback. And at this point, I've done so many reviews. I just have so many points. I wish that they were money. I would just be so well off right now. But yeah, so like at this point, I'm not really posting on the site as much, but I do review occasionally still. And so I really try to help cultivate the community. I'm a moderator, but beyond that, like this year we're doing 21 in 21, which is 21 minutes of writing a day for 2021. It's based on events. And this year we're just trying to, a friend and I are co-hosting, we have a support group. So we just have a club on the site, and people who are participating can join the club and just get more encouragement. Because last year we had 20 and 20. And I think, I mean, to be fair, 2020 was horrible. So I think that is a huge reason people kind of fizzled out. But I also felt like maybe they could just use a little more support. Because I mean, like I said, that was really integral to my writing journey, is just having that community. So I mostly like to give back, and just in terms of trying to really facilitate community and support for people so that they're a little more motivated, and so that when they do have those days where they're not writing, they also don't beat themselves up over it. But I think we tend to be really hard on ourselves if we miss like one day. We're like, that's it. I haven't written today. I'm not a writer. I'm a fake, that kind of.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. The imposter syndrome is, even for authors and editors, it's all of us. And it's a great support that you're doing that. So when you're not writing or reviewing, how do you spend your days?
Well, I like to say I write so much that I don't remember what I do when I'm not writing. And then most of the real answer is grad school. Right now, I'm in different master's programs. Because I'm a glutton for punishment, and I'm studying theology and organizational leadership. So that is, I mean, if I'm not writing like for myself, I am mostly working on schoolwork. But when I actually do have a minute to just like have fun and I'm not spending it writing, I like to read. I like to garden, sort of. I get like really hot in the summer, so my gardens get neglected in like July and August. But I like. And I like to paint, and I like to sing, but it's hard to say I like to do that in my free time because I also just kind of do it constantly while I'm doing other things. So, yeah. So
what do you grow, and what are your, mediums for painting?
Sure. So okay, when I'm gardening, I grow whatever I see that I'm like, wow, that's pretty. And I have no clue if it will work in my soil type. Or I just see a plant and I'm like, this is a really nice plant. I'm going to get this plant. And then I plant it and I hope for the best. I think that's worked out better for me since I started doing more like indoor gardening where I actually, it's fine. Yeah, I really am not I'm not doing a vegetable garden or I don't like enough vegetables anyway. I would probably have them and then just never eat them. I just I just grow whatever is like attractive to me, really. I do have a big lavender plant out front. I really like lavender. I planted a bunch of bulbs last year, but just anything, honestly. I just like plants, just in general. I love plants. I did, for anybody who follows me on Twitter, they know because I spammed the Twitter timeline the other day with like 25 tweets, just a thread of tree research I did because I got really excited about it. And then painting, used to be acrylics mostly, and then two springs ago, I don't remember. 2020 has destroyed all sense of time.
Right.
2 springs ago, my last semester of undergrad, I took a watercolor class and thought I would hate it. But it turns out I thought I would hate it because I'm used to like those little Crayola tins of watercolors. And these were like good watercolors that come in a tube. And you add however much water and the color payout is so much better. And so I actually really love that. I have a ton of watercolors at home now. I have like 2 different watercolor journals of like watercolor paper. So mostly watercolor these days when I have a minute.
Yeah. Years ago, I tried acrylics, and it was an abstract class that I took, so that wasn't too bad. I didn't, totally stink at that, and I enjoyed it. And so I learned a few things, and we have around the house that's nice that you did that, dear, kind of thing. But the only kind of plants that work for me are the spider plants, because they pretty much, I can't kill them. And it just gives me such a thrill when they make the little babies. So I'm happy to cut some off and send them wherever. My daughter's like, you should sell them. You grow so many of them. I'm like, nobody wants that.
I think false. There's actually a Facebook group called like Houseplant Hobbyist. It is probably the only, I was going to say the most wholesome place on Facebook, probably like the only wholesome place on Facebook. And it is literally just people like sharing pictures of their plants and hyping each other up and asking how to take care of stuff. And I bet if you posted in there, like, does someone want some spider plants? People would be like, yes. And you have takers.
Awesome. I might have to look into that. Although I would not take all their advice. I would be in there and lurk and listen, and then I wouldn't execute. So that's great. Let's talk a little bit about your writing now. Not a little bit, a lot actually. I want to hear about the Chosen Grandma story. So will you share with others how Edna came about?
Sure. So this is I think most people can guess, because usually it's really fun to connect with people this way. Usually when someone hears about the story, they're like, oh my God, did you know about this Tumblr post from like 1,000,000 years ago? And that is where the story came from. It's actually originally a tweet from this account called Brooding YA Hero. So, and actually the person who runs it, I have since met on Twitter through her personal account, totally unrelated. Like we bonded over our mutual love for Liz. And then I found out that she ran that account and I was like, oh my God, I'm writing that story.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing. So it's just this tweet where the account just tweeted out like, why do they always choose teenagers to be chosen ones? You'd think they'd choose someone more emotionally stable, like a grandma. And then people on Tumblr loved that. And they were like, I would read the hell out of a series about an 83-year-old, like, grandma who's just running around with her like anxious but loyal orderly who makes sure she takes her pills on time. And so, so that's it. That post was like the basic idea, pretty much. And it's like I said, it's great it's great when people hear I'm writing a Chosen Grandma story, because they're like, oh, that reminds me of this post. And I'm like, that's where I got the idea,
And so from there, you clearly had to put in a lot of work to build a story, to get to the point where you are today. So tell me about how you put some characterization around Edna and her supporting cast, the minor characters, how you made them real also, but with a purpose. Do you mind?
Sure. So I did very little planning for the story. The reason I had that post saved in a folder on my computer for writing inspo, which I again almost never look back at. I usually forget it's there, but Young Writers Society has this event. One of our commenters runs it, I think, unless she's not awake right now. I forget if she's here, but she runs it. It's called Last Man Standing. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's just people write like a minimum of 1,500 words a week until everyone drops out except one person. So I needed an idea for that. So I pulled that out. And I did like the tiniest amount of planning. I was like, okay, so she's got her orderly who accompanies her, and I know nothing about him right now except that he's gay. I don't know why that was the first thing. It just kind of was. And I don't even remember what I knew about the villain at that point. I had so little planning. I'm just not a planner, which is terrible. And so I don't know. It was really, at the beginning, it was really just I had like this grandma and I had her orderly. and I had a vague villain, and I just kind of started writing. And then like as I was writing, I feel like I could see like a little further ahead in the story each week as I did my 1,500 words. So I'm honestly not sure how that came about, really. It's a mystery. I don't remember. I should really just write down every time I have an idea and be like, here's this idea I had, and here's how I came up with it. Because when people ask later, I can't remember. So I mean, she started out as like a grandma. You know, she likes to knit, and she's not actually a grandma, but she's got lots of like grandnieces and nephews that she's basically a grandma to. And she makes cookies, and she looks like the quintessential grandma. You know, she's like kind of fat, and she's got like a permed hair and glasses and whatever. And then, but then I gave her a tragic backstory because I can't help myself.
Gotta have the flaws.
Right, you gotta, that just, and I love angst, so every draft of the story, like it sounds so funny, the premise sounds so funny, and it is a funny story, I swear it is, but it also gets very emotional and angsty because I can't help myself, and every draft got more angsty. But so I think that was part of it, because she's a very, I mean, she's, like I said, she's like the quintessential grandma, and she's a very kind and cheerful character. But she also has these things in her past that have hurt her and that are still hurting her, even if she's like, no, I'm fine. You know, she just kind of hides it a lot because she's like, well, I'm the grandma character. I have to like be strong for everyone else, you know? So I think that just that kind of almost contrast can give characters dimension a lot. When you've got something where like this character looks a certain way and you expect them to be a certain way, but there's something in there that is kind of the opposite of what you would expect. And I think that sort of happened with the side characters as well. So there's the teenage girl who is kind of mad that she's not the chosen one, because in a normal story she would be. But like, and she's like really rude, and she's very angry, and I adore her. And people in the first draft were so annoyed with her. No problem. But I love her. She's very angry, and but she's like, you find out later, like she's very traumatized, and like that's really where this comes from. It's like PTSD, really. So I think that not that there aren't just people who are rude just because, but you know, like it's good to give some depth where you can, and not everyone has to have deep reasons for everything they do. But I think for any major characters in a story, I think it's good to have that.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you plan to share your story with the world now that you have many revised drafts under your belt? So I'm querying it right now for traditional publishing. So fingers crossed. It's been 2020 was not a good year to choose to query, but that's the year the story was ready. So here we are, I guess. Very nice. And so do you have challenges that you can share for aspiring writers or other people that want to query that you might be able to save them some of the same mistakes if you've made any?
Sure. Yeah. So well, one thing that I did do beforehand, and that I definitely suggest, is to do a lot of research into your query package. Basically, you need a query letter, which is like a cover letter for your novel, a synopsis, which not all agents ask for, but a lot of them do want it. And even if they don't want it up front, they will probably want it eventually. So that is more of just a summary, like a one-page summary of the major plot points. And then you need to make sure the whole novel should be complete and revised and as good as you can make it, but definitely even more so like the first, I'm going to say 50 pages. Most agents want some number of sample pages. It can be anything from like 5 pages to 50 that you just send along with the query letter. So make sure that the writing is as good as it can be, and then just do research. Make sure you know how to write a query letter and a synopsis. If you're on Twitter, there are editors, writers, agents who will do giveaways for like critique packages for those things, so they can tell you, how yours looks if you win a giveaway. I mean, a lot of them also offer that service for money. If you just look for giveaways because they're free. So you can access those services for free sometimes. Or if you have any friends who are agented writers or who are querying themselves and have been doing it for a while, they might be able to help as well. I personally actually think I'm okay at synopses, and I kind of liked writing mine, and everyone else hates them. So when people are having trouble, I usually offer to read their synopsis because I actually kind of liked it. I think I'm good at it. So that's like a major thing. I think a lot of agents get so many emails. I remember one person had just become an agent, and she was on Twitter talking about how, like, the first week or something, she had 600 emails in her inbox. So I understand that as a writer, it's like really frustrating when you're like, are they just auto rejecting over like stupid things? But on the other hand, if I had 600 emails in a week, I would just die. So so make sure that you are following their query guidelines. Like if they ask for like a query letter and like 5 pages and whatever else, make sure you give them exactly what they ask for, because that will probably be an auto reject because they just have too much to look at. So if you can't even be bothered to follow directions, why are they going to look at you? So that's a big part of it. And just making sure your query has everything it needs. It should mostly be about the story. It's not a summary of the whole plot, but it should just get you to like the hook. So like for mine, I talk about Edna being the chosen one because that's kind of the weird thing about it that makes it a little different, is that you have such an old person who's a chosen one. And then I get just a little bit into the plot where I'm like, here's what her mission is as the chosen one. And it's important to her because this, so that's like kind of her goals. But as she goes further, she learns some new information that, you know, maybe makes her question things. It's more specific than that in the query letter, but I obviously can't remember exactly what I wrote in the query letter. So do make sure the bulk of it is the story and not you and how you came. Like that first question you asked me is not something that I would put into a query letter. I wouldn't be like, and I began writing at the age of 11. That's not, they don't care. Don't include that. Just focus on the story.
Very good tips. Thank you so much for sharing. And so I've asked for all of these fans and followers that have joined us tonight to also ask questions. So they're rolling in while I've been asking you mine. We've got some good ones here. Let's see. KL asks, my mother wants to know, will Edna have a second chapter in her chosen hero story?
Oh, well, I hate to disappoint your mother. I'm so pleased that your mother read my story and liked it, but probably not. Okay, here's what I said on Twitter the other day. I am old and tired, and I don't want to do series because I'm old and tired. I will say that I will not totally shut down the idea. Like, who knows? Maybe I have an idea a few years down the road, and I'm like, you know what? Edna needs another adventure. But right now, I'm not planning on it. So we'll just say that, I guess.
We'll see if she gets picked up and is hugely popular and your fan base.
And everyone's pressuring me, and then I'm like Arthur Conan Doyle, and I got to decide. And then even that doesn't work, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So you've mentioned that you're a pantser, correct? The whole I didn't plan.
Yeah.
So if you didn't start your story like if you didn't first plot and write an outline, what was your revision process like to make sure that you have these things that make your characters have some depth? How do you come back after the fact and add that in?
So real quick, I just have to mention that I actually am planning a story right now. And on one hand, I do feel like this is going to help me a lot. But on the other hand, I'm like, who am I? It's different. That's where my tree thread came from with all my tree facts, because I had to do some tree research. Anyway, so this was a weird one for me. I think it was maybe different than what I would typically do, just because normally I draft a lot faster. Like, so since this was for a last man standing contest, my most recent thing I drafted in like 5 months. And it took like 2 NaNoWriMo events, because in the middle of that, I just kind of, my motivation totally dropped off and I didn't do anything. So it was probably been less than that if I had stayed motivated the whole time. But Edna's story, because of the nature of this contest, I wrote it over the course of a year and a half. So even though I didn't like do planning beforehand, I really did a lot of brainstorming in the middle. Like if I got a chapter written for 1 week, and then I'd be like, oh crap, I don't know where I'm going next. And I would do like some hasty panicked brainstorming, which I do also do when I draft faster, but it goes better if I have more time. Sometimes I was posting it on Young Writers Society while I wrote it at the time. It's not there anymore, but it was at the time. And so I would just like ask the people who were reading along, I'd be like, what are your predictions for what happens next? And I'd be like, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, I'm gonna use that. Oh, that was my plan originally, but then I forgot because that's just what I do. So I had like kind of a lot of input while I was writing it, which like almost substituted for planning in a lot of ways, I think. So I feel like my process was like a little different than it is anyway. That helped immensely. I think writing it over that amount of time helped the story, and also gave me, like, you really need some distance before you revise so that you're willing to part with certain aspects of the story that don't work. And I mean, I have a bad memory, so the advantage of that is that a year and a half later, I don't remember what happened to the first 10 chapters, so I am not attached to them anymore. So I think that made revising so much easier than it normally is for me, because I had just so much like physical, like temporal distance from it, in addition to emotional distance. And so basically, once I was done with it, I collected any comments people had given me on it that I thought would be helpful. And I did a read through of it. It was 160,000 words at the time, so it was a lot of reading. It was like 625 pages printed out on computer paper. I love trees, but I killed them in that case. And so I did a read through, and I just took notes as I did the read through. I was like, this doesn't really work. This could be combined. This character probably just needs to be cut. I like them, but they're not adding anything. So essentially, I think it's not even so much that I don't plan, it's that I don't plan until after my first draft. That's really, like, before the second draft, and any subsequent drafts, really, that's where I'm doing my planning, where I'm going through and thinking really hard about the structure of the characters and what works and what doesn't, things like that.
Fantastic. Yeah, that way you get the kind of the uninterrupted plot of the essence of it down. All right, so we want to know who's your favorite character you've written so far.
I mean, that's such a hard question. Okay, well, if we're not limiting ourselves to the Chosen Grandma story, I have a 10-year-old girl in this thing that I'm planning right now. I did try to pants it. I did like 30 pages back in May before I was like, I can't do it with this one. This won't work. I have a 10-year-old girl in it who just kind of showed up. I didn't plan her or anything. And she's going through a spy phase, so she likes to pick locks and things. And she really gives so much stress to her older brother because he's anxious and a rule follower. And she is just like, has like a passing acquaintance with the rules, and she's going to break them. And I adore her. Like, she's up for adventure. She's not going to listen to rules, but she's also like very kind. And I just love her. She's my favorite, probably.
Badass, if I'm allowed to swear.
I forgot I was going to actually ask you beforehand. And I forgot to ask you.
I'll put a disclaimer on there when we put it afterwards. Sorry, I'll ask for forgiveness afterwards. Awesome. All right, so I'll let some more of these questions come in, and I'll get back to some of mine if that's okay. So definitely your fans and people interested in more details should visit the Revision Division blog, because you've written some great tips as far as like the basics of character development and arcs. I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, just about some of the things I've said about characters.
Yeah, like give people the basics of, what do you need in an arc? What makes for good character development through the whole book?
Okay. So we'll focus on character development because I think in terms of just using my own characters for examples, I think I have an easier time with that than the arc. I think that readers have an easier time identifying character arcs than writers, which really sucks when you are trying to like prove that you know what your own character's arc is, and then when you revise for that. So we'll just focus on development and pretend like I know about arcs. I did write a blog post about arcs for everyone watching. I just am really good at faking it, and I'm pretty sure I all used like a published example and did not draw my own characters for that one blog post. So with character development, I think the three major things are their appearance and their actions and their dialogue. So using Edna for an example again, like her appearance, she's, like I said, she's like the quintessential grandma. She wears like an old house dress that's not really in fashion anymore. And she has a flowery handbag, and she walks with a cane, and she has glasses, and she knits all the time. Like, she just looks like a grandma. Like, you would just look at her and be like, that is a grandma over there. but then, I mean, on the other hand, and her actions and dialogue often fit with that. So like appearance can be shorthand for what a character is like.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a walk-on character, I'm going to say appearance can basically be the whole thing. Like if you need a character and we just need to know who they are for this moment real fast, I think you can get away with just using their appearance and having them live up to exactly what people would probably expect from their appearance. But with anyone who's going to be around for a while, you want to go deeper than that, or they just become a stereotype. And they're not as believable, and also probably are not going to have readers get as attached to them. So that's where actions and dialogue come in more, where, appearance, actions, and dialogue can all work together, but they can also all kind of contradict each other in different ways. So like one thing that Edna does, I almost don't know if this is a contradiction because so many people reading the story are like waiting for it to happen forever. But at one point she weaponizes her knitting needles. She like stabs a guy with a knitting needle. He deserves it. But like she did, that's not like, she's a sweet little old grandma. You wouldn't expect her to stab someone with a knitting needle or anything else. But it also still fits her being a grandma because she does it because he just hurt like one of the people she now considers basically her grandkid. So like on the one hand, it kind of ties into the grandma thing, but on the other hand, it's like this vicious attack that you just don't expect from her. And there's that, just the ways that actions can match appearances versus not matching appearances. There's also, you can think about conscious actions versus unconscious actions. So conscious actions, that can be major decisions they make, down to just like going to like pour some tea for their friends, or just anything that they're thinking of doing, versus unconscious body language, like I have to keep stopping myself because I'm in a swivel chair and I keep wanting to just like I remember I'm on video and I shouldn't do that. So things like a lot of nervous habits, I think, or things when people are experience a strong emotion and they just kind of react involuntarily. Body language mostly is going to be unconscious things. So you can also see how that lines up. If someone, like I am a big fan of having characters say, I'm fine. And then like they clearly, if you look at them, what they're doing right now, they're clearly not fine. They're like shredding up the label of a water bottle, or like around their stomach or what, like they're not fine. And they're just going to tell you they're fine. They do that all the time. Not at all remotely based on my own real experience or personality in any way. So I think that's something that you can really look at. And just see how the actions, conscious and unconscious, how they support each other versus how they contradict each other. And same thing with dialogue. And with dialogue, important to remember also that it's not just what they say, it's how they say it. So Edna often says things cheerfully, and sometimes she says things cheerfully that you would not expect to be said cheerfully, but it's Edna, so she does. And on the other hand, Clem, the teenage girl, she often says things irritably because she's always irritable, or at least that's how she's always like scared and angry and insecure, but it manifests as being irritable, which is another thing to think about. Is the character, how they're feeling, is that always obvious that this is how they're feeling, or do they mask how they're feeling with, either stoicism or with other emotions? Do they compensate by showing a different emotion rather than the one that they're really feeling right now? So that's another good thing to think about.
Yeah, I think your tips of using appearance and especially action and dialogue to make sure that as you're building those characters and giving them those characteristics, that it helps you create a character that's distinct and different from the other characters in the cast. So the way they speak, or whether it's irritably or cheerfully, that way the characters come off the page and they don't seem like they're all saying the same thing or the same way.
Right. I do know one common piece of advice if you're not sure if you're achieving that, specifically with dialogue, is that you can just take all your dialogue tags and context away and just list the dialogue in a conversation and have your readers try to, even if it's someone who hasn't read the story, can they pick out, like, say, okay, there are 3 characters in this scene, we'll call them just character A, B, and C. Can you tell who's saying what, or does it all sound like it could just be anybody? And that I think I've only done that probably once, just kind of for fun, but it's just one way that you can have readers tell you, without the context, the rest of the context of the scene, is the dialogue do they speak in different ways or express different things? And can readers tell who's who just by the dialogue?
Yeah, then you know you've got some strong dialogue there where it conveys tone and emotion on its own without relying on the tags. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so I love your posts, your tweets, your tips in our blog, and I feel like whether you're talking about grammar or the elements like that, I love developmental editing, so those concepts are fun. But it's great to geek out with you over these things because you're so clear and thorough about the information that you share. And so I think I want to say thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of people here supporting you tonight that also appreciate that. So before I jump to a little bit more about what you have coming up in the future, let's take some of these questions that you have. Here, I feel like there's a bunch that came in and I've let them pile up. All right, so here's a good one. Do you ever have a moment where you don't feel like you're as great of an author as you'd like to be? What do you do to fix it?
Well, okay, so I have that moment a lot, and querying in 2020 is like a great way to have imposter syndrome. Like you are just 100% sure that you are just the worst and that it's terrible and that no one's ever gonna want it. My number one answer, probably to most questions involving writing and feeling bad about writing, is community. I mean, if you can have some people who have read your story, even if they haven't read your story, like they've seen you tweet about your story and they're like super invested and they haven't even read it yet. And I know like that makes it harder because you're like, but for all they know, the writing still sucks. Like they don't really know, they haven't read it. But if you can find some people who are really excited about your story, I mean, that has helped me so much. I would do shout outs right now, but there are so many of you watching and I'd be sure to forget someone. It would make me feel bad that I forgot you. But there are just so many people who are so supportive of my writing and of my stories. And when I am having those moments where I'm like, oh my God, I'm the worst and I can't do this and no one's ever going to want it and it's actually terrible and I suck. And I mean, they will just shower me with love and be like, no, your story's awesome. And I actually, the last thing I drafted, I had some friends comment on it while I was drafting. And that so helped me get through because I mean, I was fast drafting. I'd been revising the Chosen Grandma, so I was making my writing like better. And then I went back to a first draft of an unplanned story that I wrote in 5 months. So like while I was writing it, I was like, oh my God, this is shit. Like the whole a disclaimer about the past swear word, my apologies. But that was really what was going through my head at the time. So for the sake of accuracy, I had to say it. And so just to have their live comments. I know like having people read your story while you're drafting is not for everyone. I know for some people that is super nerve-wracking. But I did it for the Chosen Grandma story, and like now I don't think I could do it without people commenting. Like it's just so helpful to have people, you know, because I just tell them, I'm like, this is a first draft, it's gonna be bad. I really don't want any feedback. Like if you have some, keep it in the back of your mind. I might ask you when the story's done, what do you think could have been better? But I mean, so I basically just have a whole draft that's just covered in positive comments and places where my friends loved what was happening and loved the characters. So even when I was working on a part and I would like be like, hey, the next chapter is in the Google Doc and it sucks and I'm sorry. And then they would read it and they'd be like, oh, I'm so mad you said this sucked. It was really good. And it's so helpful. Like you are not going to believe it all the time. And, you know, you're still going to have those moments where you're just like, oh my God, I am the worst writer ever. Which you're not, because we all think that, so we're all vying for that title, but there can be only one, so it's probably not you, just like the odds are against it. but it's just helpful to have. It's just helpful to have people who can uplift you in those moments of extreme doubt, or to have those comments in a Google Doc that are just all excited and can really help you fall in love with your story again if you're just at a point where you kind of just hate it because you're so sure that it's bad.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you about the community, and I encourage a lot of times as an editor, I'll get manuscripts that I can tell haven't been put in front of too many people, and so I'll push back and say, to save your money, you know, first let your friends and family read this, get feedback from them, then get a group of other writers or readers in your target audience that you can put it in front of and get their feedback. But don't change anything unless you agree with it and you have consensus. So it's really good, the process that you used where you're like, I might come back to you on that, but the encouragement is great. And having the sharing your work and building up the confidence is awesome. So you have another one out here about how to motivate yourself on those tired days.
Okay, well, I don't know if anything I say in this will be helpful to anyone, because here's the thing. I'm in 2 graduate programs. So usually I am feeling really unmotivated on my homework. So I write to procrastinate from doing the things I'm supposed to do for a grade. And if you're not in school, that is not helpful. And also, if you are in school, don't do what I do. You should just do your homework. I mean, the thing is also that in regards to writing, I do so many different kinds of writing. I'm not usually, I am right now. I'm trying to draft the thing, like I'm planning one thing that I want to draft, and then I'm doing a read through of my other story so that I can start to revise, and then I'm querying the Chosen Grandma story. So I actually am kind of doing 3 things right now. But normally I'm like 1 novel at a time and that's it. But I do so many other kinds of writing that even if I don't feel like working on my novel, I probably have something I feel like working on. I have a blog post for you. I have a blog post for my blog, which has turned into like just a grammar blog because I just love grammar. It's exciting.
Oh, I love it.
It wasn't meant to be a grammar blog, but that's what I keep writing about, so it's fine, I guess. You know, I journal. I don't journal as much as I used to, probably because 2020 sucked and I didn't want to put a lot of that on paper. But you know, I have so many different types of writing that I do that it is very unlikely that I'll be tired from all of them. I will say one thing is, I mean, even if it's like a string of days, unless you have a deadline, just take a break. Like if you are that burnt out on writing, you probably just need a break at that point. And I think we all feel bad when we take breaks. And if the break ends up being like a few weeks or a few months, or even in some cases a few years, I mean, then you start to like, oh my God, I'm not even a writer. I don't write anymore. But I mean, if you're really that burnt out and you're not feeling inspired and you just kind of hate everything you write, it does not hurt to take a break. And you probably should just do that, unless you're on a deadline and then you just kind of got to suck it up and just keep it. And then you can take a break once it's turned in.
Absolutely. That sounds good. All right. So about your future, what's next? You said you were working on something besides the Chosen Grandma. What are you working on?
Yeah, so one thing is called Hungry Girls. I've been tweeting about that a lot. That idea also came from Twitter, but in a totally different way. So that's the one I just drafted between July and November of 2020. And then I let it just sit over Christmas and did not look back at it at all, even though I kind of wanted to. And so I'm about halfway through that right now. I just do like 5 chapters or so a day, just reading, taking notes. And then I'll probably go back to the people who read the first draft and be like, okay, remind me what you said I could do to make it better, because I have already forgotten, shockingly. They'll know. I have a terrible memory, so that's good. So I'm preparing to revise that, and actually new things going on with that too, because I wrote it. I had this moment before I started drafting where I knew that it needed to be in first person present, and I am a third person past girl. And so I just like quieted that moment and was like, nope, we're just going to draft it in third person past. And it worked. It was fine. But then recently I was beta reading a friend's story that's in first person present. And I was like, I really think I need to try this in first person present at least. I'm pretty sure it has to be in first person present. So I just did just the first chapter, like just to see, and I actually super loved it. And then I was in denial about how much I loved it. I was like, well, maybe I'll do this. And then I like gave it back to my friends who had read the first draft, and they were like, no, this is the way the story was meant to be told. You have to do it. And I was like, okay. So I'm not in denial about that anymore. So when I revise it, it will be the first thing that I've written in first person present. I mean, at like a novel. I think I've probably done some short stories, but for a novel length thing, it'll be the first thing that I've done in that viewpoint. So exciting, mostly exciting, a little bit scary. Slightly annoyed that I can't just stick to third person past. That is my point. But I am excited for it. And then this other thing is untitled on Twitter. I just call it Groundskeeper Whip because it is a work in progress about a groundskeeper at a cemetery. I wrote 30 pages in May, And I do like what I had, but I really had no idea where the story needed to go or like what the conflict was or basically anything. And it is a lot sadder and a lot spookier than the other things I write. So I was like, no, I need to plan this one. So I've been doing a lot of research and a lot of note taking. And I think I am almost to the point where I can like attempt something vaguely resembling an outline. And we'll see if I can even do that or if I do actually have to pants it at that point.
I think there was earlier a comment about groundskeeping, so you must have some fans on here that are aware of your work on that.
I'm going to say if they follow me on Twitter, then for sure, because I talk about that a lot. I've talked about Hungry Girls a lot. Like whatever I'm working on, I cannot keep a lid on it.
Nice. That's good. All right. Well, so thank you so much for talking with me today about characters and your journey with the remarkable retirement of Edna Fisher. I love it. And do you want to tell maybe new fans here tonight where they can learn more about you?
Sure. So I do have a website, just a static page that's just a basic about, and from there you can find my blog if you are super interested in grammar, as you should be because it's very exciting. Also a page with information about what I'm working on. Groundskeeper isn't on there yet because I haven't even started drafting it, but that is andersonbooks.wordpress.com. And then I also have a Twitter account, which is, I mean, that's like, I'm on Twitter just 100% of the time. I'm probably on Twitter even more during the school year when I am not supposed to be on Twitter as much. So on Twitter, I am at Eliz M. Anderson. And there's a pinned tweet there if you want to know more about me and my writing. Also, if you want to drop me some money on Ko-Fi because I'm broke, I would love if you would buy me a coffee on Ko-Fi. That is a tweet if you have a little extra change lying around. And then there's a thread there. That tweet is the start of a thread, and there's a little like random facts about me, and like I love cemeteries and trees, which is probably obvious at this point to everyone. And a little bit about what I'm working on, and like some pictures of my cat. So yeah, so Twitter. Go to Twitter. That is where you will find out more about me than you probably even want to know. I am very annoying on Twitter. I tweet constantly. It's a problem. I need to like kick myself off the internet again.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it so much. This was fun. You've got lots of people thanking you. What we'll do as far as the giveaway is I'll put the people who attended, I'll put them in the random name generator, and then on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, we'll announce who won a 30-minute critique session.
Awesome. All right. Good luck to everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
All right.